Backli always thought, why didn't I go in the CIA? They were recruiting the best and the brightest in the post-war Ivy League with his language skill. In fact, he had a gig in Mexico City. He did have a gig, yeah. He had a gig in Mexico City, became also central to the plot against President Kennedy. Later, the Mexico City tapes, or the Mexico City about the Oswald going to Mexico City. When Buckley turned his hand to being a novelist, Blackford Oaks, he went back. Blackford Oaks was a CIA agent, correct?
And the very first of those novels, Saving the Queen, it was the first published account of what CIA training was like in Washington, D.C. Because
at the farm.
At the farm, because it was published in 1975. And in those days, remember, that's when the Church Committee and the others are exposing the CIA. And Buckley wants to defend it. He said, thinks these are patriots. So the CIA, which vetted everybody's book, you know, they go through it, they red pencil it. They trusted Buckley, so they let him write what he wanted to. So he described what his own training had been like in Washington back in 1950. Then Buckley goes over to Mexico City, and we know who his boss was, a guy named E. Howard Hunt.
For conspiracy theorists, you're having a field day now.
Yeah, now you can get
the station chief and the operatives in the Mexico City embassy that later becomes so controversial because either a guy who doesn't look like Oswald shows up saying he's Oswald in September, right before the assassination.
And after the assassination, guess what friend of Buckley's in the CIA was feeding him information, but also was Howard Hunt, saying, no, this looks like there's something else going on here. There might be a bigger conspiracy here. So Buckley always knew that stuff. He had all these contacts. He knew
during the Bay of Pigs and then later the missile crisis. Given Buckley's understanding of Spanish culture, particularly the church, what Castro had done, where did he come out on all this, on both the Bay of Pigs? Was he a interventionist and felt we should do more, and that because you mentioned that Kennedy didn't send his guys in.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, he was an interventionist.
That's always been a bone of contention among the hardcore guys like Buckley. You did leave him on the beach. Yeah, you could have won if you just reinforced him.
Yeah, and you know Howard would tell him this stuff because Howard had worked with those guys, Howard Hunt, and then when they became exiles and were living in Miami, Howard Hunt, after he was released from jail following Watergate, went down to Miami and was looking after those guys. So he was very close to them, and it had ruined his career. Buckley was very personally loyal. You know, it's one thing everybody loved about him. And he helped Howard Hunt out all his life and tried to support him in all the things he did. And he really respected the CIA. Buckley, you're right, he did come out of that upper class culture.
Buckley knew immediately when the Watergate break-in happened and E. Howard Hunt was named, he realized this was more than just a break-in of Democratic Party. Yeah, there was something. E. Howard Hunt had his hand in many different operations throughout the thing that Buckley knew about, right?
Well, then I've got a scene in the book I remember when after Howard Hunt's wife dies in a plane crash during Watergate.
By the way, the beautiful, brilliant, tough as nails E. Howard Hunt's wife.
Yes.
She's an extraordinary woman.
She was an extraordinary woman. You know who really admired her was Norman Mailer. There's a lot of pages on her in his book, Harlot's Ghost, about the CIA. And then Howard Hunt, because Buckley had been trying to get Howard to tell the real story of Watergate. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't even tell Buckley what went on. Then finally, so there's like the winter of 72, early 73, Howard Hunt goes to see Buckley, tells him everything. Everything. Tells him about a plot to murder Jack Anderson, the columnist. He tells him everything. He knew more about Watergate than Woodward and Bernstein did. And Bill Buckley, and he kept it to himself. What I saw was he would drop these little hints. No one ever picked up in this. He'd drop little hints in his column. He'd say, well, I think Nixon's okay in Watergate unless we find out, say, there's an attempt to assassinate Jack Anderson. And you're reading this, you're saying, what's Buckley talking about? Buckley's talking, he's telling you.
Did Buckley ever write that down in anywhere? Did he record anything that is in any of his papers, the true stories he heard from Howard Hunt about Watergate?
Never did. The one who heard the most was his son, Christopher, who recorded some of them in his great little memoir, Mum and Pup. He told me once, I think Christopher decided that it better kept to himself, that Buckley told him at one point, he was getting phone calls from Hunt in prison. Buckley paid all of Howard Hunt's legal bills himself because Buckley would do this. Buckley would give money to also a liberal.
What a loyal guy.
Incredibly loyal. He helped me.
Because everybody abandoned Hunt.
Yeah, that's why Buckley stood by him. It was not about Nixon. It was about Howard Hunt. And he wanted to defend him. He really admired Hunt and he liked him and he thought he was a patriot. And he was getting, really abused. The other guy who stood up for them all was Reagan. Reagan stood up for all the Watergate guys.